So tonight we're talking about Ben. And who's Ben, right? Thank you so much for joining me today on Whole Wellness with Ann. And we are in a series on boys from my perspective as a daughter of an absent father growing up in a toxic home. And this is a follow-up series to the series I did not that long ago on abuse. And that series walked through my childhood perspective growing up in my home and the dynamics that I grew up with in my house and the values that I was raised with and the troubles that I had and how my life changed from early childhood throughout my preteen and adolescent years into young adulthood and college. And I promised during that series, or towards the end of that series, I touched on the fact that I completely left out boys of that series. And there was a very logical reason for that, and it was purposeful because I wanted to do a follow-up mini series, which is what we're doing right now. And this is video number 3. Where I talk about the boys in particular and go through my experience with boys, because there's a variety of lessons to be learned from my personal experience with boys, guys. You know, in adolescence, I think for the most part, girls refer to the opposite sex as guys. And I genuinely hope that this little series about boys and what I have to tell you about and demonstrate things that happened, problems I had, challenges that I ran into are helpful regardless of what sexual orientation you are personally. Because I think the information is still relevant and applicable to most people. And it can be applied, I believe, whether you're a male or a female, the concepts are still the same. What is missing from a male when they're growing up with an absent mother? What are they not getting? And a daughter who's growing up with an absent father. And in the intro video and video number 1 of this little series on boys, we cover what it means to be daddyless or have an absent father. And that can be everything from the death of a father at a very young age and everything in between. When we're talking about daddyless, it can be a physically present father, as was the case with me, but who is completely emotionally and intimately disconnected from his children and a workaholic, which was the case with me. And it can be a father that flits in and out physically and emotionally, mentally, you know, spiritually, you know, that's in and out of the child's life, and loves strongly and intimately 1 minute and then is resentful and neglectful the next minute. That chaos and erratic kind of upbringing. We're talking about most fathers, unfortunately. I think the percentage of men who are fathers and are present and intimately connected with their children, and that percentage I think is very small. I happen to be very fortunate to have a husband who is a present father. He is very connected with both of our kids, and he knows them. He knows their needs. He knows their personalities. He knows, pretty much knows everything about them, and is in tune with each of them on a level that I've never witnessed a father have with his child. Certainly not in my home. My dad did not know me at all. So that's why we're doing this series, is to kind of demonstrate the struggles that I had, and everything I'm talking about in this series and the stories I'm conveying to you are to serve a purpose, to show to you the difficulty, the challenges, the complete confusion and chaos and ignorance I had about how to deal with the opposite sex, because I had 2 older brothers and a dad who, the dad was absent and the 2 older brothers tormented me. So in childhood, I did not have a strong and loving male role model in my life. Meanwhile, I also had a mother who quite possibly was, I believe, borderline personality disorder and very chaotic and all over the place. And I was her emotional punching bag. I was the scapegoat of the family. I still am to this day. And I was to be my mom's therapist growing up because my dad couldn't meet her needs and wasn't meeting her needs. And they did not have an intimate relationship at all. It was like a business partnership. It was very odd. If you haven't already watched the abuse series, I encourage you to do that at some point in time. It's a long series, but again, it kind of follows the same path where we talk about trends or experiences that demonstrate what can happen to a young woman or a young man that has an opposite gender parent that's missing, or daddyless in my case. And girls, they grow up and they become very confused and they're ignorant about how to relate to men, how to associate with, how to interact with them, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, how to communicate their needs, how to communicate compromise, how to communicate period in a romantic relationship. And that happens way too often. I have too many friends and family members that I witness these things happening, and their circumstances are very similar to mine, where they were daddyless growing up. They don't realize that they're self-harming. And keep in mind, self-harm, as a professional say, is not limited to just cutting. When we're talking about self-harm, it can be drug addiction, drug abuse. It can be alcoholism. It can be sexual promiscuity. It can be any one of those things that actually is just considered self-harm under this blanket umbrella, self-harm, because it's not filling. It's like filling a superficial void, but it's not actually getting the person's needs met because they're completely detached from their own needs and they're in a survival mode like we talked about in the abuse series. So in the last video, video number 2, we left off in junior high and right around 7th, 8th grade, and some of the wonky things that were going on inside my head and the feelings I was having and the struggles I had. And I'll tell you what, throughout junior high and early high school, I was literally in a state of observation. I felt like I was so much on the outside of things going on in my world that I didn't even really feel like I existed. I felt like I was invisible or should be invisible because I did not fit in with this reality that I was a part of physically. I was trying to achieve normalcy, the normalcy that I thought others had, in terms of, you know, healthy families and friendships and happiness and joy. But deep down inside, I think on a subconscious level, I truly believed by this point that I must be doing something wrong, because why would I be the only one struggling with these feelings? Why was I suffering? Why did I feel so out of it? Why did I feel like such a reject? Why did I feel so out of place? Why did I feel so invisible? Why was I feeling so wrong? You know, well, my dad indicated to me very early on and throughout high school, it started right around 7th or 8th grade, that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough just being me, because he didn't know me. He wasn't able to build up that natural part of me, that my spirit, my soul, my confidence. I had no ability to feel comfortable in my skin and believe in myself and give myself joy and fulfillment as a young woman, because I had nobody telling me that I was okay, that I was beautiful, that I was talented. Now, early on, my parents did compliment me, and my mom encouraged me by getting me a couple Christmas gifts that were art supplies when I was a young girl, you know, preteen. But it was always with this, yeah, you can be an artist, that's a good hobby, wink, wink, but then you have to do this other thing that's part of the real world and make a living for yourself. Being an artist is a nice hobby, you know, but it's not really what people do to make a living. And so from very early on, my very first passion was art, and I was told that wasn't good enough. So from very early on, I was told I wasn't good enough. I just wasn't good at anything other than art and singing and anything creative. And I had no clue that I was from the family that I was from, that I was being raised in this unhealthy and abusive atmosphere with very depleting relationships, and mentally and emotionally and spiritually and physically being let down by many members of my family over and over and over again from around the age of 8 through throughout my preteen and adolescent years. And I was not getting my own needs met because my parents did not know me. My mom thought I was her and had her thoughts and feelings. She very much parentified me, and I was an extension of her, and I was supposed to be an extension of my dad and who my dad thought I should be and not me. So I never got that from either of my parents, and I had 2 older brothers that constantly antagonized me and abused me as well. So I was in a constant state of never feeling like I was good enough, and of constantly trying to meet the needs of others and to make others happy and exceed their expectations for me. Not just my parents, but other people too, like in school, like the teachers and stuff like that. And I was failing left and right every time I failed to meet their needs or exceed their expectations. So I was failing over and over and over again too, on a frequent basis. It seemed like no matter what I did, I couldn't do anything right with my parents or at school. It started to kind of overflow because it started at home, where I was trying to impress my family, get my parents' attention, try to fit in, and it carried over and overflowed into school with friendships and other relationships. So as I mentioned, in this video, we're going to be talking about Ben, who I introduced at the end of video number 2. Ben was a boy I met, I believe it was in 7th grade. And as you know, I went to a Catholic school from 1st grade through 8th grade. And then the only high school we had in the town I grew up was a public high school. And that's when I went to public school for the first time. But when I was in 7th grade, my Catholic school was invited to be part of the music program at the public junior high, which was right across the street from the Catholic school. And the nuns would walk us across the street for band class every day so that we could participate in and be a part of a band and learn musical instruments, everything that we didn't have. All we had was the recorders when we were in 5th grade or whatever. So when we went over to participate in the band class at the public middle school, I met this boy named Ben. I didn't meet him, but he was part of the middle school band at public school. And he was so good looking at that age. That was my earliest memory, aside from my classmate, Jeremy, who was a very nice boy. But we, you know, at that age, it's like boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't know. It wasn't really anything. It was a boy that I met on the playground near the cheese castles and maybe held hands with, but that's about it. But Ben was someone who I really fell head over and heels in love with. I thought he was very, very handsome. And at that age, basically all you do as a young girl is you look at the person. I really don't know what, if anything, happened between the two of us happened in terms of conversations or anything like that at that young age. I believe we just had band together, and that's where I first met him. And every day, I remember in school in junior high, I really looked forward to band class because I just liked being around Ben. He seemed like a really nice boy. And he was really good looking. And I also really enjoyed band. So, every day I remember in 7th and 8th grade when it was time for band class, it was a good time for me. And of course, you know, at that age, I think all of the girls were talking about who their crushes were and everything. And I had no time for any of the boys in my own school and my own class, because my sights were set on Ben. I just had the biggest crush on him. And then something huge and phenomenal happened that honestly you could write I feel like novels could be written about my life, to be honest with you, with some of the things that I've experienced in my life, having to do with boys, having to do with jobs, having to do with my family. I feel like novels need to be written because the irony of these stories is so weird. It's almost unbelievable. It's like when I tell people these stories, it's like, you're not going to believe this, but guess what happened? You know, and it's truth. It's truth. I have no reason whatsoever, no motivation to lie or make up something like this. But here's what happened. It was, I believe, the summer between my 8th grade and 9th grade year. And at the end of 8th grade, I was really kind of looking forward to high school, because not only was I nervous about public school, but I knew that once we went to high school, I'd be seeing Ben in all my classes, and much more frequently, like at high school and in the halls and stuff, because we would all be going to the same school versus being segregated by public school versus Catholic school, you know, like in junior high and grade school, because I didn't have the slightest clue who he was through grade school. But the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade year, lo and behold, who moved into the house directly across the street from the house I grew up in? None other than Ben's family. Can you believe that? I couldn't believe it myself. I honestly couldn't. Ben and his family, he was the oldest of 4 boys. He had 3 younger brothers. He had one that was, I think, 2 or 3 years younger than him, and then a set of twins a couple years after that. I think at some point in time, I'm probably going to have to, for the purposes of this, you know, channel and the content and everything someday, and I've talked about doing this before, go back in my diaries. I started my diaries and my journal my freshman year of high school, so when I was 13 years old, and I still have all of them written in pencil and pen. And someday I probably will go through and read some of those. Just, it's entertaining stuff. Hopefully it's entertaining to you guys, but it puts a lot of these, series videos in perspective, and tells you what my mindset was at that age, at the age of 13. So when his family moved in across the street from me, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was in a different world. I thought I was in La La Land. I just couldn't believe it. And the way our house was laid out, I was fortunate enough to have a bedroom on the side of the house that looked out across the street at their house. So I had a bird's eye view, and I had a tree right in the middle of my window to distract any onlookers from easily seeing me peer out the window and just watching Ben play basketball out in the street, or ride his bike, or play with his brothers. Or it was really just a major infatuation that I had at that age. And I was head over heels in love with him that summer. And it really stunk that they moved in across the street from us, because I then became disabled, so to speak, in my own home, in my own yard, growing up at a very young age, at the age of 13. When I turned 13 that summer, between my 8th and 9th grade year in high school, I could not leave the house, the front of the house, and go bike riding or go for a walk or play without being cognizant and aware that he was in that house and might possibly see me. I couldn't just roll in the grass with my kid brothers and my kid sister. You know, it was, unless I went out the back way where they couldn't see, or he couldn't see, I was very aware all the time that he was in that house across the street. And when I look back on those years, I remember being very aware that he was there, and not knowing how to behave, not knowing how to live life and go about my normal existence at that age, my normal existence, without him, thinking of him and being aware of his presence and being cognizant of how I was presenting myself. But at the same time, I didn't know, had no clue what was the right way to present myself. I wanted to make sure at that time that I presented myself in a way that I thought at that time would be appealing to him, instead of really having a clue about my own self and my own needs and my own desires. And I didn't even know the kid. Seriously, this is what we're talking about. I feel so sorry for this girl, because she was ignorant. She was completely ignorant, because I could never talk to my dad about my crush or who I was attracted to or who I might be interested in. And he obviously never then got the opportunity to say, well, do you even know anything about him? Because you can think someone's good looking, but if you don't even know them, how can you let this crush go so far as to become a, you know, passionate love interest of yours when you don't even know the person? You don't even know what their weaknesses are, or what their faults are, or what their temper's like, or, you know, whether they believe in Santa Claus, or, you know, there's all these things that at a young age, you just don't have a clue. All you know is that they're good looking and they moved into the house next door or across the street from you. So of course, you know, here we are. I'm a young girl who can't even talk to my dad about my art, much less talk to him about this crush on this boy that I have. So I was flying solo, very much solo. But my family picked up on the fact that I had a crush on Ben, and they knew that I thought he was good looking. And so they teased me quite a bit, especially my two older brothers. And that became a source of contention between us, of course. And by the time I started freshman year in high school, I was so distracted and so nervous about starting public school that all eyes went inward to me believing that I was all wrong, and I had to make sure that I was all right before I went into public school in 9th grade and ventured into this new territory of being a public school student and a high schooler at the same time. And I had heard stories from my brothers of swirlies and noogies and all these things that happened. So when I started freshman year, I had fear about things that my brothers had told me about. I had anxiety about going to public school for the first time. I had excitement because I was going to meet some new people. I did have a couple of friends that I had made through band. So I had already known a couple of girls, not just the girls in my Catholic school class in 8th grade. So I felt pretty okay starting 9th grade, but I was very scared. I took art my freshman year in high school, and the first day of art class as a freshman in high school is when I walked into the classroom and saw this boy, Chad, who is now my husband, and fell head over heels in love with him. And I thought he was very good looking. And as my freshman year progressed, I started to learn that he was also a very nice boy. And he was a sophomore. He was a year older than me. So all we had together, and the only time I saw him was maybe passing in the hall on our way going back and forth from lunch or in art class. And I remember, when I think back now, purposely walking with my girlfriends up and down the sophomore hall after lunch just to perchance run into Chad, who I fell madly in love with my freshman year in high school. Meanwhile, Ben still lived across the street from me at home, and I might have had a class with him or two, but I don't remember. And I can tell you that my freshman year, I fell so head over heels in love with this Chad guy that Ben kind of faded into the background. I think he might have known that I had a crush on him because, you know, how could you not? This girl's staring at you all the time. But I didn't know how to talk to boys. I didn't even know how to just be myself. I was, like I said, in a constant state of trying to please everyone else around me, because that's what I was being taught at home, that I had to do and say and dress and be what my parents wanted and expected me to be, and I wasn't good enough just being myself. And I had no intimate connection with either one of my parents during this time, so I couldn't go to them for any advice or any counsel or any leadership or any wisdom. I had girlfriends that were polar opposite. I had some that were wild and crazy, partying, hyper, you know, flirts. And I had very conservative, quiet, sweet girlfriends and everything in between, because I kind of was friends with whoever wanted to be friends with me. Again, I didn't have any identity, I would say. I would venture to make that statement as true because at that time, the only thing I really did know about myself is that I loved to create and I wanted to be an artist. I forgot to mention this one, but this is a boy that I met in my freshman year of high school that I did mention in the abuse series, but I'm going to mention him again here because it's relevant and important before I wrap this video up. It's Matt. I met him in my freshman algebra class, and he was a junior. And this boy was, if I may say so and be completely blunt and honest, he was an ugly boy. He was just not good looking at all, but he was tall. And he was a junior. He was older than me. And so he saw me, that I was developing early, that I had breasts compared to the other girls in my class. And he, I think, started to flirt with me, identified me as being potentially easy, and really poured on the charm with me. You know, he was a smooth talker and all this, and I fell for it hook, line, and sinker when I was a freshman. Now, my dad being the overbearing, protective, controlling man that he was, I was fortunate enough to not get into trouble, but I also didn't know my head from my hole in the ground with this boy, Matt. And so, of course, I flirted back. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I was flirting with him. I was flattered by the attention. That's all I knew at the time, is here was a boy, even though he was ugly and I didn't even like him. There was no commonality whatsoever. I didn't know a thing about him. There was nothing in common except we had a same math class. All I knew at that time was here was a boy that showed me attention, and I loved it and lapped it up like a dog. What can I say? I had no clue. I had no clue. You know, I was flattered, supremely flattered by the attention. And I think most women who grow up daddyless, where they're not taught their own self-worth and their own value, do fall for that. They're flattered by the attention that the opposite sex or the same sex give them. And that certainly was my case with Matt in my freshman year algebra class. And the games with him went back and forth for many months in 9th grade. And in my diaries, I have written all these experiences, and I think I even say in my diary, I don't even like him. I don't know why I'm even paying attention to him. Or it was almost like, I will admit that at the time I was leading this boy on, but I didn't know I was. At the time, all I thought was, ooh, here's someone who's paying me attention. I feel special, right? But we don't know that at that age. Girls do not know that. We have no self-awareness. When you're raised in the home like I was, where I was not intimately connected with either of my parents, they didn't know anything about me and didn't help me in any way, shape, or form. You know, I think at some point in time, they probably felt like they tried to help me or thought they were teaching me the right way or teaching me the right thing just by saying, don't do that or do this. But that's not effective for kids. You don't do as I say and then do the exact opposite. That's not how kids learn. And it was absolutely true for me. Just saying it had no bearing on me whatsoever, no influence whatsoever. The point was, they still didn't know me. My parents did not know me. They were not intimately connected with me. Neither one of them were. They were mentally, emotionally, and spiritually abusive, and detached, and ignorant of who I was as a person and what my needs were. And they didn't try to connect with me and understand anything about who I was. I was just another one of their kids. I was one of 6. I was just another mouth to feed. I mean, honestly, and another load of laundry to do. I mean, I know that sounds terrible. Keep in mind, I don't mean any bitterness when I'm doing these videos. I have peace, great peace and great love for my parents and my family now. It's just that I have healthy boundaries in place now because I'm aware and I see exactly what's going on and what the dynamic is in my family, and I'm very careful. Not to say everything's perfect, but there's no real intimacy with me and anyone in my family, and because the manipulation and the toxicity and the boundaries aren't respected, and it's just a bad situation. So as much as I love them and I want the best for them, I do pity them and their choices and behaviors and priorities. We're just not on the same page, and I've accepted that. But I absolutely do love my family, and I don't want to communicate any bad or harsh feelings towards them. They're just different. They're different than my goals and priorities. I want to strive towards a healthy well-being and a state of mental wellness and spiritual wellness, and being that person who is ever evolving into a better person and using the gifts that I have to the maximum ability to help as many people as I possibly can and be there to support others who are potentially going through the same thing that I went through or just starting their journey where I started a couple years ago. So that's where we're going to end video number 3 about Ben and Chad when I was a freshman in high school, and Matthew, Matt I say, who was just a glimmer of a speck of crap on my radar in freshman year in high school, because as I mentioned, this is someone I didn't even like. I caught his attention and he flattered me, and so of course me not having the slightest clue that's how it went, but it fizzled out. Nothing ever came of it. So hopefully you're starting to see the trend. It's still early in the game. When I start getting into the older years, the ages of 15, 16, and my sophomore year and my junior year, there's more boys, more serious relationships, more exposure to different boys. And there's a lot of hiccups. And as I head into my senior year in high school, this big devastating devastating to me event and experience with a boy named Christian in my senior year. And you'll start to see the trend in the experiences that I had and the ignorance I had, in the flailing and the confusion and chaos and the complete blind navigation of how to interact with and just be friends with boys. So hopefully this is helpful. I sure appreciate you guys staying tuned, and thank you so much for joining me on Whole Wellness with Ann. Take care of you. Bye, guys.